I never thought a mother could be just kitchen help at her own daughter's wedding. Yet there I was, Brenda Mitchell, 62 years old, wearing a simple beige dress instead of the mother of the bride gown I'd picked out months ago, arranging appetizer trays in the back room of the Lakeside Gardens venue. The caterer needs extra hands, Addison had told me 2 days before the wedding, her voice cool and detached. Mom, would you mind helping? The Prestons know everyone in this town. And Richard's parents want everything to be perfect. Perfect. That word had become Addison's obsession since she'd started dating Richard Preston 3 years ago. Perfect house, perfect job, perfect fiancé from a perfect family. And her ordinary mother with her ordinary life just didn't fit into that perfect picture. I adjusted my pearl earrings, the ones my late husband John had given me on our 20th anniversary, and pushed through the kitchen doors with a tray of canapés. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and white orchid centerpieces that had cost more than my monthly pension. Every detail was exquisite, from the hand-calligraphed place cards to the string quartet playing in the corner. Everything I had paid for with the money from selling my vacation cottage, the one place that still held memories of our family before John died. Just circulate with these, the catering manager instructed me, not knowing I had signed the check for $75,000 that covered his services. As I moved through the crowd of strangers, Addison's new world, I searched for a familiar face. There were none. My brother couldn't make it from Arizona, and I had no other family left. The few friends I'd put on the guest list had apparently been overlooked in the final count. Excuse me, a gray-haired gentleman in an expensive suit stopped me, taking a canopy. These are delicious. Are you with the catering company? Before I could answer, Addison appeared beside us, radiant in her designer gown that we had chosen together at a boutique in New York. She'd been so different then, excited to have me there, valuing my opinion. That was before the Preston family had fully worked their influence on her. Who is this lovely lady? The man asked Addison. I waited, my heart suddenly racing. Surely now she would acknowledge me, introduce me as her mother, the woman who raised her alone after her father died when she was only 12. Addison's eyes met mine for just a second before sliding away. Oh, she's just a family acquaintance helping out today. The tray nearly slipped from my hands. A family acquaintance? Not, this is my mother, Brenda. Not even this is Brenda? How nice of her, the man remarked, already losing interest and turning back to Addison. I stood frozen as they walked away, Addison laughing at something he said, not looking back. The weight of her words pressed against my chest until I could barely breathe. A family acquaintance. After everything, the midnight fevers I'd nursed, the dance recitals I'd cheered through, the college tuition I'd worked 2 jobs to pay for. In the corner, Richard's mother Eleanor caught my eye and gave me a small dismissive nod. She knew exactly who I was. She just approved of what her son and my daughter were doing, erasing me from the picture because I was too ordinary, too middle class for their world. I retreated to the kitchen, set down the tray, and locked myself in a small bathroom. Tears burned in my eyes, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. The woman in the mirror looked back at me, her face lined with years of working hard, loving fiercely, and now being betrayed deeply. She forgot. I whispered to my reflection. She forgot who signed the check. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about erasing 29 years of motherhood. 29 years of putting Addison first, of building my world around her needs and dreams. And now, on what should have been one of the proudest days of my life, I was the help. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Addison. Mom, the dessert table needs setting up. Could you check with the kitchen staff? I stared at the screen at the words Mom followed by another order, as if I were just another vendor to be managed. That was the moment I knew. Nothing would ever be the same again. The daughter I raised was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as an embarrassment to hide away. And I had let it happen, one small compromise at a time, always telling myself it was just a phase, that my sweet Addison would return. But standing there, in a bathroom at her wedding while wearing an apron instead of a mother of the bride dress, the truth hit me like a physical blow. I was nothing but the woman who signed the check. The woman who would be hidden away once her usefulness ended. The drive home from Addison's wedding was the longest 20 minutes of my life. The silence in my car felt deafening, broken only by the occasional ping of my phone, Likely more instructions from Addison about things that needed to be done. I didn't check it. For once, I couldn't bring myself to answer her call. My modest two-story house looked exactly as I had left it that morning. The porch light still on, yesterday's newspaper still on the step. It seemed wrong somehow that nothing had changed when everything had changed. I kicked off my sensible heels at the door and sank into my favorite armchair, the one John and I had bought when we first got married. The familiar cushions embraced me while the weight of the day pressed down on my shoulders. On the mantel, Addison's life smiled back at me through dozens of framed photographs. Her first day of kindergarten, high school graduation, college acceptance letter day. A timeline of sacrifices that had led to this moment. Was it worth it, John? I whispered to the empty room, to the ghost of my husband who had been gone for 17 years. Did we raise her to be this person? My mind drifted back to the days after John's sudden heart attack, when Addison was just 12. The life insurance barely covered the funeral and outstanding medical bills. I'd been a part-time school librarian then, the job allowing me to be home when Addison finished school. But part-time wages wouldn't keep a roof over our heads or braces on Addison's teeth. Within a month, I had taken a second job working evenings at the local hospital as an administrative assistant. My mother moved in to watch Addison while I worked late shifts. For 3 years I survived on 5 hours of sleep, microwave dinners, and too much coffee. I remembered the Christmas when Addison was 14, how she had her heart set on a new computer for her graphic design hobby. I picked up extra weekend shifts for 3 months, eating nothing but ramen noodles to save every penny. The joy on her face Christmas morning made it all worthwhile. When she got accepted to NYU, her dream school, I remortgaged the house. Her degree in marketing cost nearly $200,000, but I never complained. I sold John's vintage car collection, pieces of jewelry, anything of value. It's an investment in her future, I told myself. I had dated occasionally through the years, but whenever a relationship became serious, I hesitated. What if he didn't understand my devotion to Addison? What if Addison didn't accept him? My last relationship ended when Ted, a kind widower I'd been seeing for nearly 2 years, suggested we take a vacation during Addison's spring break from college. She's counting on coming home, I had told him. Maybe next year. There never was a next year. Ted moved on and I focused on getting Addison through college debt-free. After graduation, when she struggled to find a job in New York, I dipped into my retirement savings to help with her rent. Just until you get on your feet, I told her. 6 months turned into a year, then 2. Then she met Richard Preston at a charity gala. A gala she could only attend because I had bought her the designer dress she absolutely needed to network with the right people. The Prestons were old money, with a family business in real estate development. Suddenly, my down-to-earth daughter was talking about summer homes and country clubs. As their relationship progressed, Addison's calls became less frequent, her visits home rare and brief. "Mom, you wouldn't understand their world," she'd say whenever I asked about meeting his family. "It's different." When Richard proposed with a diamond ring that probably cost more than my house, Addison called me ecstatic. "The wedding needs to be perfect, Mom. The Prestons have a reputation to maintain." Perfect quickly translated to expensive. The venue alone cost $30,000. The dress, another $15,000. The flowers, the catering, the photographer, each item more extravagant than the last. "I can't afford this, Addison," I had admitted, shame burning my cheeks. "Not all of it." "But Mom," she'd said, her voice taking on that edge of disappointment that always cut straight to my heart. "This is the most important day of my life. Don't you want me to have what all the other girls have?" So I sold the vacation cottage in Maine, the one place that still held memories of our family when it was whole. John and I had bought it as a fixer-upper, spending summers restoring it board by board. After he died, it became Addison's and my special place, where we'd escape the weight of our grief. Selling it felt like selling a piece of our history, but I signed the papers without hesitation. Now Addison can have her perfect day, I told myself, except it wasn't perfect. Not for me. Because somewhere between signing that check and today I had become invisible. I was no longer the mother who sacrificed everything. I was just the woman who signed the check, the family acquaintance helping in the kitchen. A tear slid down my cheek as I stared at the photos on my mantel. So many years of putting her first, of neglecting my own dreams, my own life. And for what? To be hidden away like an embarrassing secret? My phone rang again. Addison. This time I let it go to voicemail. I woke the next morning to 7 missed calls from Addison and a text that read, "Mom, where are you? The gift table needs organizing before we leave for our honeymoon." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. For the first time in my life, I didn't immediately jump to fulfill her request. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat on my back porch, watching the early morning light filter through the old oak tree John had planted when we first bought the house. The doorbell rang just as I was finishing my second cup. Through the peephole, I saw my sister-in-law, Margaret. John's sister had flown in from Boston for the wedding, though I'd barely seen her at the reception. "You left early," she said as I opened the door. Her keen eyes took in my rumpled appearance. I was worried. I ushered her inside, grateful for the company but unsure how to explain what had happened. Margaret had always been direct, one of the things John had loved about his older sister. "I saw what happened, Brenda," she said, settling onto my couch. "The kitchen duty. The way they hid you away." My eyes burned with fresh tears. Having someone else acknowledge it somehow made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "She called me a family acquaintance," I whispered. Margaret's face hardened. "I heard. I was coming to find you when I overheard that conversation." "I don't understand how we got here," I admitted. "When did I become someone she's ashamed of?" Margaret reached for my hand. "This isn't about you, Brenda. It's about Addison trying to fit into a world that values the wrong things. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I shook my head, bewildered. "Do? What can I do? She's married now. She's chosen her path." "And what about your path?" Margaret leaned forward. "John wouldn't have wanted this for you, being treated like a servant by your own daughter." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. "Addison." I silenced it. "You've always put her first," Margaret continued. "When does Brenda get to be first?" The question struck me like a physical blow. When indeed? I'd spent so many years being Addison's mother that I'd forgotten how to be Brenda. Margaret stayed for lunch, reminiscing about John and sharing stories about her work as a travel writer. Her life seemed so full, so vibrant compared to mine. When was the last time I'd done anything just because I wanted to? "I'm headed to Italy next month," she mentioned casually. "A small group tour of Tuscany." My editor backed out at the last minute. "The spot's paid for." She left the invitation unspoken but hanging in the air between us. Italy. John and I had always talked about going someday. Someday when Addison was grown. Someday when we had extra money. Someday never came for John. After Margaret left, I finally called Addison back. Her voice was sharp with irritation. "Mom, where have you been?" "I've been calling since last night. I needed some time to myself," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Well, we're leaving for our honeymoon in 3 hours, and the gifts still need to be cataloged and brought to our apartment. Can you come over now?" "No, how are you?" No acknowledgement of yesterday's humiliation. Just another demand. "No, Addison. I can't." The silence on the other end was deafening. "What do you mean you can't?" she finally asked, her voice rising. "Mom, this is important." "So am I," I said quietly. "And yesterday you made it very clear where I stand in your life. A family acquaintance. Wasn't it?" Another pause. "You heard that?" "Mom, I was just, Richard's family is very particular about." "About what, Addison? About acknowledging your mother? About treating me with basic respect." "You're overreacting," she said dismissively. "It was just easier to pretend I'm not your mother?" My voice finally broke. "To hide me in the kitchen while I paid for your perfect day? Is that what this is about? The money?" Now she sounded truly angry. "I knew you'd throw that in my face eventually." The accusation stung, but something in me had shifted. For 29 years I'd have apologized, backtracked, done anything to smooth things over. But not today. This isn't about money, Addison. It's about respect. It's about recognizing the people who love you for who they are, not who you wish they were. "You don't understand," she started. "No, I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "I'm just sorry it took me so long to see it." I ended the call before she could respond and sat in my quiet living room, heart pounding but mind strangely clear. For the first time in decades, I had stood up for myself. My phone rang again almost immediately. I expected Addison, but it was Margaret. "Have you thought about Italy?" she asked without preamble. I looked around my living room, at the photos of a daughter who had outgrown me, at the empty spaces where my own dreams had once lived. "Yes," I heard myself say. "I'd like to go." The Rome airport buzzed with activity as Margaret and I collected our luggage from the carousel. 2 months had passed since Addison's wedding. 2 months in which my life had undergone a transformation I never expected. "Ready for this adventure?" Margaret asked, her eyes bright with excitement. I nodded, feeling a flutter of nervous anticipation in my stomach. At 62, I was finally in Italy, the place John and I had always dreamed of visiting together. The thought brought a bittersweet pang, but not the sharp grief I'd carried for so long. Our small tour group consisted of 8 women, most around my age, all traveling without spouses. As we boarded the shuttle to our Tuscan villa, I found myself seated next to Helen, a retired art professor from Chicago with silver-streaked hair and a ready laugh. "First time in Italy?" she asked. "First time anywhere, really," I admitted. "I never got around to traveling before." Helen smiled knowingly. "Let me guess. Family responsibilities?" "Something like that." The conversation flowed easily, and I found myself sharing more than I'd intended about Addison, the wedding, and the painful aftermath. "My daughter didn't speak to me for 6 months after I sold the family home," Helen confided as our shuttle wound through the Tuscan countryside. "She thought I was erasing her childhood memories. What she didn't understand was that I needed to create new memories of my own." Her words resonated deeply. In the weeks following the wedding, I'd made decisions that had shocked everyone, especially myself. First, I put my house on the market. The family home that had become more of a museum to the past than a place for me to live. It sold within days, well above asking price. Then I'd taken early retirement from the library where I'd worked for 23 years. The director had been stunned. "But Brenda, you've always said you'd work until they carried you out." "Plans change," I told her, surprising myself with how little regret I felt. Most shocking of all, I decided to use the proceeds from the house to create a new life. Half went into a secure retirement account. The other half I designated for living, truly living, for perhaps the first time since John died. Addison had been furious when she found out. "You sold the house?" she demanded during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "Without telling me? All my childhood memories were in that house. Memories you can keep without me maintaining a shrine to them," I'd replied calmly. "Besides, you haven't visited in over a year." "That's not the point. What about when Richard and I have children? Where will they visit their grandmother?" The question had struck me as particularly ironic, given how eager she'd been to hide me away just weeks earlier. "I'll have a new place," I'd assured her. "Smaller, easier to manage, and closer to the things I want to do." "What things?" "You don't do things, Mom. You just work and take care of the house." Her words had revealed so much about how she saw me, not as a person with desires and dreams, but as a function, a backdrop to her life. "That's changing," I told her. The villa appeared ahead of us, golden stone glowing in the late afternoon sun. Our group exclaimed in delight as the shuttle pulled into the gravel driveway. The 2-week tour would take us through small Tuscan towns, vineyards, and historic sites, with cooking classes and wine tastings interspersed throughout. That evening, after a welcome dinner of pasta and local wine, I sat on the terrace of my room, watching fireflies dance over the vineyard below. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Addison. I hadn't told her I was leaving the country. Another break in our usual pattern. The next morning, our group gathered for our first excursion. A visit to a small family-run olive oil farm followed by a cooking class. Helen fell into step beside me as we walked toward the waiting van. "Sleep well?" she asked. "Better than I have in years," I admitted. The olive grove was ancient, trees gnarled and twisted with age yet still productive. The farmer, a weathered man named Paolo, explained in halting English how his family had tended these trees for 5 generations. "The old trees," he said, patting one trunk affectionately. "They have deep roots, strong, but they still need care, attention. If you neglect, they give no fruit. I thought about my own life, how I'd neglected my own roots while tending exclusively to Addison's growth. Was it any wonder I'd felt so withered inside? During the cooking class, I laughed more than I had in years as we bumbled through making pasta from scratch. My dough was too wet, then too dry, and my attempts at shaping tortellini looked more like misshapen dumplings. But the chef just winked and showed me again, his hands guiding mine with patient expertise. Not perfect, he said when I finally produced something recognizable, but delicious all the same. Not perfect, but good enough. Maybe even wonderful in its imperfection. The thought followed me through the day, settling into my heart like a revelation. That night I finally called Addison back. She answered on the first ring. "Mom, where have you been? I went by your house and there were new people living there." "I'm in Italy," I said simply. "And yes, I sold the house. I thought I mentioned that." Her stunned silence gave me no satisfaction, only a quiet certainty that I was at last on the right path. "Italy? By yourself?" she finally managed. "With a tour group. Margaret arranged it. But why didn't you tell me? What if there was an emergency?" I gazed out at the starlit Tuscan sky, so vast and full of possibilities. "Then you'd handle it," I said. "Just like I'm handling this new chapter of my life." 6 months after my Italian adventure, I barely recognized my own life. The small condo I'd purchased near downtown was nothing like my old home. Modern, minimal, and filled with light rather than memories. My walls now displayed photographs of Tuscan landscapes and Roman ruins, alongside a few treasured family photos. I'd joined a book club, taken up watercolor painting, and even begun volunteering at the local arts center. The phone call from Addison came on a Tuesday morning, as I was preparing for my painting class. "Mom, I need to see you," she said, her voice tense. "Can we meet for lunch?" I agreed, suggesting a cafe near my condo. When I arrived, Addison was already seated at a corner table, fidgeting with her napkin. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the tightness around her mouth. "You look tired," I said, sitting across from her. She gave a brittle laugh. "That's one way to put it." We ordered her usual elaborate salad with dressing on the side, my newfound comfort with a hearty soup and crusty bread. The differences between us had never felt so stark. "So," I said after the waiter left, "what's going on?" Addison looked down at her hands, her wedding ring catching the light. "Richard and I are having problems," she admitted. "His parents. They're not what I thought." Something twisted in my chest. Not quite satisfaction, but a sad recognition. What happened? "They're controlling everything. Where we live, how we spend our money, who we socialize with." She looked up, tears filling her eyes. "They even have opinions about when we should start having children." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "Last week Eleanor, Richard's mother, told the housekeeper to rearrange my closet because it was disorganized. She has a key to our house, Mom. She comes and goes as she pleases." The irony wasn't lost on me. Addison had been so eager to become part of the Preston family, so willing to push me aside to fit into their world. Now she was discovering the true cost of belonging. I tried talking to Richard about it, but he doesn't see the problem. He says I'm being overly sensitive. She wiped at a tear. Sound familiar? It did. They were the exact words she had used to dismiss my hurt after the wedding. "I don't know what to do," she confessed. "I feel like I'm disappearing." Just as she had made me disappear. I could have pointed this out, could have lashed out with all the hurt I'd carried. But the woman sitting across from me wasn't the confident, dismissive bride of 6 months ago. She was my daughter in pain. "What do you want from me, Addison?" I asked quietly. Her eyes widened slightly. This direct question wasn't part of our old dynamic. I don't know. Advice, I guess? Support. She hesitated. "Maybe I could stay with you for a few days just to clear my head." I took a deep breath. "You're always welcome to visit me, Addison. But I'm not sure staying with me would solve anything." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that running away isn't the answer. If you want your marriage to work, you need to establish boundaries with the Prestons. Make it clear what you will and won't accept." She looked at me with new awareness. "Like you did with me." I nodded. "Yes. It took me 62 years to learn that lesson. Hopefully, you're a faster learner. The waiter brought our food, creating a natural pause in the conversation. When he left, Addison pushed her salad around the plate. I've been awful to you, she said softly. The wedding. What I said. I was trying so hard to fit in with Richard's family. Eleanor kept making these little comments about you. How you weren't their type, how it was sweet that you'd managed to raise me alone without advantages. She looked up, shame evident in her eyes. I should have defended you. Instead, I tried to hide you. Her admission loosened something tight in my chest. Yes, you should have defended me. I was hurt, Addison. Deeply hurt. I know. And then you just changed. Sold the house, started traveling. I didn't know who you were anymore. I smiled slightly. I didn't know either for a long time. I was so busy being your mother that I forgot to be myself. And now I'm both. I'm your mother, Addison. That will never change. But I'm also Brenda Mitchell. A woman with her own life, her own interests, her own worth. Addison wiped away another tear. I miss my mom. The simple confession touched me deeply. I'm right here. Are you? She challenged gently. Because sometimes it feels like you've built a whole new life that doesn't include me. Her words gave me pause. Had I gone too far in the other direction? In reclaiming my independence, had I shut her out completely? I needed space to figure out who I am beyond being your mother, I explained. But that doesn't mean there isn't room for you in my life. It just won't be the same as before. What does that mean? It means I won't drop everything whenever you call. It means I'll give advice when asked, but I won't fix your problems for you. It means I expect to be treated with respect, not hidden away or taken for granted. Addison nodded slowly. That sounds fair. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the air between us charged with unspoken emotions. What should I do about Richard? She finally asked. What do you want to do? She considered this. I want to try to make it work. But I need him to understand that we're a team, that his family doesn't get to control our lives. Then tell him that, I said simply. And be prepared to stand your ground. Addison looked at me with new respect. When did you get so wise? I laughed. Sometime between Tuscany and Florence, I think. As we finished our lunch, something shifted between us. Not a complete healing, but a beginning. A new understanding that would need time and effort to nurture. Would you like to come to my painting class tomorrow? I offered as we stood to leave. I'm terrible at it, but it's fun. Addison smiled. A genuine smile that reminded me of the little girl who once thought I hung the moon. I'd like that. We walked out together, two women finding our way back to each other. Not as we were, but as we could be. 1 year after Addison's wedding, I stood in my kitchen preparing for a dinner party, my first in the new condo. The granite countertops were scattered with ingredients for my mother's lasagna recipe, and a bottle of good red wine breathed on the counter. The doorbell rang precisely at 6. Helen and Margaret arrived first, bringing flowers and more wine. They'd become my closest friends over the past year, often joining me for coffee after our painting classes or weekend trips to nearby art festivals. The doorbell rang again as I was arranging Helen's flowers in a vase. I'll get it, Margaret offered, setting down her wine glass. I heard murmured greetings and then Addison's voice, hesitant but warm. It's nice to see you again, Margaret. I stepped into the living room, wiping my hands on a dish towel. Addison stood in the entryway, holding a small wrapped package, her eyes taking in my new space. Since our lunch 6 months ago, we'd been rebuilding our relationship one careful step at a time. She'd attended a few of my painting classes. I'd met her for coffee every other week. We were feeling our way toward something new, something healthier for both of us. You're right on time, I said, embracing her briefly. Come meet Helen. Addison followed me into the kitchen, where introductions were made and wine was poured. She seemed nervous, her eyes darting around as if looking for clues to this new version of her mother. Where's Richard tonight? Margaret asked as we settled around the small dining table with our first course. Working late, Addison replied, but without the resentment that had colored her voice during our lunch months ago. Actually, things have been better. We've been seeing a marriage counselor, and it's helping. That takes courage, Helen commented. Addison smiled faintly. I had a good example of courage to follow. She glanced at me, and my heart warmed at the recognition in her eyes. Over dinner, the conversation flowed easily between art, books, and travel plans. Helen was heading to Portugal next month, and Margaret was writing a piece on small-town museums in New England. Mom's thinking of joining me for part of the trip, Margaret mentioned. We found a charming bed and breakfast in Vermont that's run by a retired chef. Addison looked at me with surprise. You're going to Vermont? I didn't know that. There was an awkward pause. Once I might have apologized, might have backtracked to ease her discomfort. Not anymore. It's a recent plan, I said simply. I was going to tell you about it next week when we meet for coffee. She nodded, accepting this as she wouldn't have a year ago. After dinner, as Helen and Margaret insisted on helping with the dishes, Addison pulled me onto the small balcony that overlooked the city park. I have something for you, she said, handing me the wrapped package she'd brought. It's not much, but... I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a framed photograph, one I'd never seen before. It showed me in profile, laughing at something off camera, my face lit with joy. In the background was the Tuscan villa where I'd stayed during my trip. Margaret sent it to me, Addison explained. After our lunch, I asked her for a photo of you from your trip. She sent several, but this one. She trailed off, her eyes moist. This is who you are now. Happy. Independent. Beautiful. I traced the frame with my finger, touched beyond words. I had it framed in silver, she continued. I know you've always preferred silver to gold, though I'm not sure I ever acknowledged that before. It was such a small thing, this recognition of my preference. Yet it meant everything. Thank you, I said softly. Addison took a deep breath. I've been doing a lot of thinking this past year. About how I treated you, about what I prioritized. She looked out at the park, gathering her thoughts. I was so focused on becoming someone the Prestons would accept that I forgot who raised me to be strong in the first place. I leaned against the balcony railing, giving her the space to continue. Richard's mother is still difficult, she admitted. But I'm not trying to be her anymore. I'm finding my own way. She turned to me, her eyes clear and direct. I'm trying to be more like you. The compliment brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I've made plenty of mistakes, Addison. Yes, she agreed with surprising candor. But you've also shown me how to fix them. How to change, even when it's terrifying. She hesitated. I'm going to switch jobs. I've been offered a position at a smaller marketing firm. The pay is less, but the work is more meaningful. They specialize in campaigns for nonprofits. That sounds perfect for you, I said, remembering how passionate she'd been about social causes before the Prestons came into her life. Richard's parents aren't thrilled, she added with a small smile. But Richard is supportive. That's what matters. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the evening air cool around us. I need to ask you something, she said finally. And I want you to be completely honest. I nodded, waiting. Can we start over? Not forget everything that happened, but move forward? Build something better? The question hung between us, weighted with history and hope. We already have, I told her. Every coffee date, every painting class. We've been laying the foundation for something new. But it's different now, she insisted. I want you to know that I see you, Mom. Not just as my mother, but as Brenda. A woman I deeply admire. Her words filled a space in my heart I hadn't realized was still empty. I'd like that, I said simply. The sliding door opened and Margaret poked her head out. We're breaking into the tiramisu. Are you two joining us, or should we start without you? Addison and I exchanged smiles. We're coming, I said. As we stepped back inside, I caught sight of my reflection in the balcony door. A woman in her 60s with silver in her hair and light in her eyes. Next to me stood my daughter, no longer trying to hide me away, but walking beside me with new respect. Actually, Addison said as we rejoined the others, I have an announcement. She raised her wine glass. I'm organizing a small party next month for Mom's birthday. Nothing extravagant, just close friends and good food. I was hoping you'd all come. Helen and Margaret immediately agreed, already discussing what wine to bring. Is that okay? Addison asked me quietly. I should have checked with you first. I smiled, touched by her consideration. It's perfect. 3 weeks later, as I blew out the candles on my homemade birthday cake in Addison's backyard, surrounded by my new friends and my daughter, I made a silent wish. Not for things to go back to how they were, that time was past, but for the courage to keep moving forward, to nurture this new relationship built on mutual respect rather than obligation. As if reading my thoughts, Addison raised her glass. To my mother, my hero, she said, her voice clear and proud. Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. I raised my own glass in response, no longer the invisible guest but a woman fully seen and valued, finally on my own terms.